Hola, mi clase. Here we go, 9-6 quadratic formula. So I can solve quadratic equations by using the quadratic formula. So this is the quadratic formula. It's where x equals negative b, or opposite of b, plus or minus the square root. The plus or minus is because of the square root, right? We've learned that square roots have two answers. B squared minus 4ac, all then divided by 2a, okay? So it seems really complicated. There is a whole solving to this of where it came from, but we use the quadratic formula for a couple of reasons. One is when our x's, our x-intercepts, or our solutions are not nice numbers, like they come out as 16.2 or 3.4 or whatever. And then also, if it's factors that are kind of big and it's going to take some time for us to figure out what those factors would be, you can actually, in a sense, cheat and use this, okay? So this gets used a lot. I would definitely, you have to memorize this, right? Because you can't use your notes, and so you have to memorize this formula. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all then divided by 2a. Got to memorize it. So it says, how can you use the quadratic formula to find the solutions? X squared minus 7 equals 4x. So we're still solving these. That's not changing. I'm walking away. That's why I'm getting quiet, maybe. We're still solving. We're just giving you another method in which to solve for those x-intercepts. So we did a couple different things, graphing them, which you guys were not happy about. And then we factored them, which is pretty simple if you know your factors nicely. And then now we're going to use the quadratic formula, okay? So we need to set this up so it equals 0 because we're trying to solve the for our x-intercepts when y is 0, right? That's what solving a quadratic is. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to subtract 4x from both sides so that it says the quadratic equals 0, okay? So let's subtract that over because we need it in our standard form. Oh, I didn't turn my board on. I apologize. All right, minus 4x minus 4x. So we're going to get x squared minus 4x minus 7 equals 0, right? So that it's in quadratic form. Then we have our a, which is 1, our b, which is negative 4, and our c, which is negative 7. We're going to take all these and plug them in to our quadratic formula. So remember, it was negative b, but then I read it as the opposite of b. So it looked like this. We go opposite of negative 4, right? This negative outside there does not take care of this negative. So the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of negative 4 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times negative 7, which is c. And then we're going to take all of that and divide it by 2 times a, which is 1. So if I do a little bit of cleanup, this becomes 4 plus or minus the square root. 4 squared is 16 minus 4 times 1 is 4 times negative 7 would be negative 28. And then we're going to divide that by 2. I then need to do some cleanup here. We know that a minus a negative is actually plus. So when I do 16 plus 28, we get 4 plus or minus the square root of 44 divided by 2. Okay, so technically there's two solutions in here, right? So we have the two solutions would be, I'm going to draw a little arrow, would be 4 plus the square root of 44 divided by 2 and 4 minus the square root of 44 divided by 2. And then depending on the way they want you to write the answer, we would then actually have to put this into a calculator. So we would go 4 plus the square root of 44 and then equals divide by 2, and we would get approximately 5 32/100ths. And we'd go 4 minus the square root of 44, equals divide by 2, and we would get approximately -1 and 32/100. So what that means is that when we have our graph, I'm going to just do a quick sketch, it would mean that one of my intercepts will be somewhere over here, and then my other intercept would be, you know, somewhere over here, and it would be something like this. Okay, so that's what these are, right? -1 and 32/100 is this point, and 5 and 32/100 is this point. So that's what we've just solved for. Okay, so I just want to give you a visual so you remember what are we actually solving for when we're getting these numbers. So you can see now why we really want to use the quadratic, because I wouldn't be able to solve for these, right, factors. These are crazy factors. So that's why the quadratic comes in handy when we have things that won't come out evenly. All right. So find the solution of each equation using quadratic formula. So again, we always start by making it equal 0. I'm going to go minus x squared. I'm going to get negative x squared. I'm going to put in standard form minus 4x plus 21, just because I like to have it in standard form. So here's A, B, and C. So opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times -1 times 21, and then all divided by 2 times -1. So this becomes 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus 4 times -1 is -4, and then -4 times 21 would get me -84. And then we're going to divide all of that by -2. So if I do 16 minus the 84 negative, I get 100. So 4 plus or minus the square root of 100 divided by -2. Now, we actually can take the square root of 100. So this becomes 4 plus or minus 10 divided by -2. And then like we do, we split these right into two problems. So 4 plus 10 is 14 divided by -2 would get me 7. Sorry, -7. I almost lost my negative. And 4 minus 10 is -6 divided by -2 would get me +3. So sometimes we actually can find the solution. So we could have used our factor method to find these, because if you see, we got whole numbers. When we get whole numbers, that means there were factors that I could have factored this out and just went and found my answers. But I didn't have to. If I didn't want to, I could use the quadratic formula. All right, I would like you guys to pause and try letter B. I'm actually not going to do this one, but I will tell you at the end what the two answers are, just so you know what you're heading towards. So you should end up getting 6 and -4. I'll be nice. I'll give you the answers, but you need to show me the work and make sure you also get 6 and -4. So it says the function shown represents the height of a frog x seconds after it jumps off a rock. Okay, so x seconds meaning the number of seconds after he jumps. I think it's a little confusing that it says x and that equation says t, so it technically should say t. It says how many seconds is the frog in the air before it lands on the ground. So we solve this using the quadratic just like we always would. Here's our A, here's our B, here's our C. Does not change anything. Okay, another reason why the quadratic's nice is I don't want to trying to find factors of decimals. That would be really obnoxious. So here we go. Opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C, all then divided by 2 times A. So once we clean all this up, if I do, that'd be -10 plus or minus the square root of 100 squared minus 4 times -16 times all of this. I'm going to slightly cheat and jump ahead. We get -10 plus or minus the square root of 148. then divided by negative 30. Whoop, my negative and my 3 blended. Negative 32. So we are wanting an actual number. We could estimate this. So we would get negative 10 plus or minus. This comes out to about 12 and 1700ths. And then we need to split. Oh, I forgot my negative 32. So then we're going to split this as two problems, right? So negative 10 plus 12 and 1700ths over negative 32. And negative 10 minus 12 and 1700ths over negative 32. So negative 10 plus 12 and 1700ths is 2 and 1700ths divided by negative 32 would get us negative, and it's a super tiny number, 6800ths. If we take negative 10 minus 12 and 1700ths, that's negative 22 and 1700ths divided by negative 32 gets us approximately, and it is a small decimal as well, 693 thousandths. Now, this is a story problem. So that means when we're talking about seconds, that's not going to be negative. I'm not going to go back in time. There's no such thing. So this solution doesn't even work. This is the only solution that works, so we would say it's about 7/10 of a second. Okay? And so we just rounded it even a little bit more. So it would be around 7 seconds before he would land on the ground again, based off this equation that they gave us, which this is his initial height, and remember this is his initial speed, and as we know, this is how free fall works. So there's why the quadratic equation is also very helpful, because I didn't want to find those factors. All right, so it says find the number of solutions for x squared minus 4x plus 3 equals 0. So we can actually use part of our quadratic equation, just the b squared minus 4ac, to tell us how many solutions there are. So remember, with a quadratic, there could be two solutions, meaning the graph crosses at the x-axis twice. One solution, and it says real solution because we know we can have no solutions, things that don't really work, where my vertex is my solution, and then we have no solution where our vertex doesn't hit the x-axis at all. So we can use b squared minus 4ac just to determine which one of these it is. So if it's greater than 0, it's 2. If it's equal to 0, it's 1. And if it's less than 0, it's none. So b is negative 4. So I'm going to go negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1, not plus 3, times 3. So we get 16 minus 12, right? 4 times 1 times 3. And 16 minus 12 is 4. 4 is greater than 0, so there are 2 solutions. Now notice that this question is not asking us to find those solutions. It's just saying how many there are, okay? So in this case, there would be 2 solutions. We could go find them. It just means that it crosses the x-axis in 2 places. All right, so find the solutions for negative x squared plus 4x minus 4. So we take 4 squared, because that's b, minus 4 times negative 1, because that's a, times negative 4, because that's c. 16 minus, well, 4 times negative 1 is negative 4, and negative 4 times negative 4 is 16. And 16 minus 16 is 0. Since it's equal to 0, we would say 1 solution. All right. Last one, find the solution. So negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 5. We get 16 minus 20. That is negative 4, which is less than 0, so there is no solutions. That means this is floating above the x-axis. All right, so memorize that equation, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared, and memorize that b squared can be used to find how many solutions, okay? So memorize the quadratic formula, and I'm not going to type it all back out because that's really obnoxious. And then, memorize, can't spell, the b, actually I'll do this, b squared minus 4ac for number of solutions. All right. So there is your independent practice. You need to just find me my solutions, not how many, actually what are they. So more like the first couple of examples that we did, okay, not the last three. And then don't forget to finish up that one problem. All right, adios until next time.